please take it away.
The Matrix Resurrections. So this is the latest follow-up by director Lana Wachowski, who was, of course, instrumental in the original Matrix and the following two films. This is coming some 21 years after the first film, 17 years or so after the second and third, which were released in 2003. It's been a while. So where do we find ourselves? So in kind of opening act, we find Neo is again played by, of course, Keanu Reeves, is trapped in the Matrix, and but he doesn't really know it. And they have him set up as he's a game designer, and they've essentially turned his life into a video game. It's very meta. This big game that he's created is called The Matrix, and it's basically his life. And so this is a really clever way of keeping him kind of what they call on this treadmill, because he has dreams, he has like breakdowns, he has visions of like this whole other life. And when these happen, they say, "Oh, that's just that's the video game you made. You're bleeding real life.
You're imagining it." Yeah, right.
Yeah. And he's kind of kept in this pen by a character called the Analyst, played by Neil Patrick Harris, who is his therapist, but is also a computer program kind of keeping him trapped in there. We also meet the crew of a new ship called the Nemesis, and a bunch of new characters led by Bugs, played by Jessica Henwick. She has seen Neo in the Matrix. She knows he's in there, and she's like, "We have to get him out. We have to rescue him." Which, being the first act of this, they do. We know this from the trailer. He gets out, and the real story then is the rescue of Trinity, who we find is also still alive, still trapped in the Matrix, and she also needs to be rescued. And that's all I'm going to get into plot-wise. This movie is very, very different from what came before it. It's, like I said, it's very meta. It's very self-aware. Mm-hmm. It's commentary a lot on the current state of film, of nostalgia, of reboots, reruns, a lot of that. While also being we get a lot of Matrix fun stuff. We have fight scenes and shootouts, all those things. The other thing this movie does is it introduces a lot of new lore and new story and lots of new things that have happened within the world of the Matrix, which are really important. And there's a lot to get into. So that's our setup. Zach, what do you think?
So The Matrix Resurrections has been divisive. If you've seen reviews, we talked about it a little bit, I think, on our last show when we were talking about anticipating it. It has a unique score on Rotten. It's currently at a 64% as we're recording this, which is, that doesn't seem good. But what's important to remember about the middle of Rotten Tomatoes, right? The closer you get to 50 is the more divisive a film is. People either like it or they won't. And this is one of those movies. And in a really interesting twist, something I didn't see coming, what I thought would otherwise be a typical remake or reboot or nostalgia cash grab actually turned out to be something really unique. Like a slice of an artist's vision that I really did not expect to be as bold and different as it is. I actually really like The Matrix Resurrections. And it's not because it's actually a well-made movie. It's got some problems. There's a reason people don't like it for sure. But like, if you look deeper at what's going on here, it's actually kind of rewarding. And I want to dive back in and find out more.
Yeah. So I actually, when I first saw it, I just thought it was okay. I saw it in IMAX, on the big screen. I thought it was fine. I liked it, but it was just kind of okay. And then I sat and thought about it some more, and I've actually watched it 2 more times. So I've seen it a total of 3 times in like a week. And I've come to really, really like it. And there's a lot of really interesting things that are going on and that are attempted. There's also things that don't work. Like it's got a lot of problems too. But I have overall come to really like it.
Yeah, Lana Wachowski returns to write and direct The Matrix 4. The previous Matrix films were created with her sister Lily Wachowski, Lana and Lily. Now it's just Lana, and I looked into it a little bit to find out where this kind of came from, because it's odd that we get a Matrix reboot, right? Like, I mean, there's lots of reboots out there, but The Matrix just seems like one of those things that was pretty close-ended, right? Like, it doesn't seem like we need a new one. Warner Brothers is big on cash grab reboots. It's just strange that now in 2021, in the age of reboots, here comes The Matrix, right? And what does that mean? And Lana Wachowski created this film almost as a response to that idea. A while back, it came out that Warner Brothers had kind of planned to make this with or without her and her sister. And they were kind of approached as, hey, if you wanted to do another Matrix, what would you do? Okay, well, Warner Brothers is thinking about doing one, and we own the property. So what do you think? You're either on board or you aren't. And Lana Wachowski took the reins and said, okay, yeah. If now's the time to make another Matrix movie, then I'm going to do it. It's our thing that we made, and like I want to be a part of that. Lily Wachowski fell on the other side of that. They had recently had their parents both pass away within like 5 weeks of each other, and the two of them were handling that grief differently. So Lily Wachowski ducked on the project. She didn't want to return to the characters, but Lana thought, no, I can make art here. There's something unique that I can produce. I say all of that to say that The Matrix Resurrections is not in so much like a nostalgia cash grab as much as it is like a critique of nostalgia cash grabs. Very clearly in the writing, in its very plot, like in its very inception. And that's kind of rad because The Matrix has always been a meta commentary about society, right? That's what it was in 1999 when it came out. It was this commentary on cyberpunk and the internet and like information, what it means to truly exist. And in this weird way, like it still kind of is. And it fits the time that we're in right now in 2022 now, but 2021 when I watched this. And like in that weird way, somehow I think it works. Like it comes back around to this full circle thing in its thesis, in its hypothesis that it poses about the world today, which is like, what does it mean to revisit something, to resurrect something, to come back to something that previously was gone? What does that mean in the age of entertainment? How do people consume that? And I love that. And I feel like that's odd enough and meta enough that Andy, I should shift over to you. Please, bring some.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many, especially the first act, particularly where they have Keanu Reeves. He's working at this game studio, and they want him to make another game called The Matrix 4, which is
called The Matrix 4.
And there's a scene where they have all the game designers are all kind of spitballing, sit around, and it's a commentary on like what audiences and film executives think The Matrix should be. And it's very clever because it's like, oh, we need the new bullet time. What's the new bullet time? And it's, Lana Wachowski at this point could care less about kung fu and action and a lot of that cool. She's much more interested in the characters, in their situations, in what makes them who they are, and also in updating the world. And we always want movies a lot of times to be black and white, hero and villain, and they kind of introduce ideas that the real world is not ever that clear. If you look at any big conflict, any like World War, there was lots of shifting alliances, tons of gray area, and that's kind of where we are in this world.
Yeah, Lana Wachowski's kind of like growth and development as a person and as a director are laid bare in this film. I think there are scenes where in the writing, like it's very explicitly explained that, like you said, like a room full of developers, a room full of visionaries are sitting around going, "What makes the Matrix good?" And one thoughtful woman with glasses says, "The Matrix is about philosophy, right? It's about all those scenes where they talk about Nietzsche and." And this crazy out of body. That's what people want in the Matrix. And then there's like two frat bro developers who are like, no, they want bullet time. That's what matters. We want action, explosions. And Neo is sitting in the middle of this scene, like racking his head, like, what am I supposed to do with this? How am I supposed to pick this up and do something with it? And it feels so appropriate as a reflection of Lana Wachowski's personal feelings about revisiting this. Like, it's this wonderful kind of meta commentary baked right into like a $200 million blockbuster action flick. And those developments from Lana Wachowski aren't all positive. Where I think the writing really shines is her ability to embrace this idea and kind of turn it on its head, almost like a Charlie Kaufman film. The parts where it hurts are going to be in scenes with action, where Lana Wachowski has stepped away from her previous offerings. She said in interviews, I'm a different kind of director. I look at this stuff differently now. And the action, I think, suffers. It's not as good in The Matrix Resurrections. It's a little flat. I think they, I don't know. Like it just doesn't quite come together. And go ahead.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's one of the criticisms. The action, which kind of redefined the previous films, it's a little lacking, but also, those films redefined action movies. But now it would be much more different. That's an impossible task now because we have great action movies. We have John Wick. We have The Raid. Like, we have a lot of these, great fighting movies, kung fu, gun fu, whatever. We didn't have that in 1999. That a lot of that was still being done over in Asia, in Hong Kong cinema, and it hadn't made its way to the U.S. So they were completely redefining what action was. And we're not going to use stunt doubles. We're going to teach the actors. The actors are going to do the stunts. The actors are going to learn to do all the fight scenes. But there's nothing to really do. She's not looking to recreate action again. So, but it does fall a little flat. The action scenes are a little choppy. Like, it's got a little bit of that Jason Bourne quick cut. So you don't have very smoothly choreographed fight scenes like you did in the kind of original films.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple reasons for that. And really what it boils down to, I think, is confidence in the director's chair. There's only one director here. The previous films had two, right? It was both the siblings. And I think they drove each other's art and they gave each other confidence. So they would hang on a shot of Morpheus for 5 seconds longer in The Matrix 1 than they would in The Matrix Resurrections. The Matrix Resurrections actually features a fair bit of footage from the first Matrix film, used in ways that I thought was at times artful, at other times a little in your face, but regardless. And it just looks like such a different film. It's a different color palette. It's a lot steadier. Like, this movie's a bit quicker cut. It's a bit different. And I think it's because we don't have Lily Wachowski. It's just one of them, and they're a little unsure. And additionally, like I said, Lana Wachowski has said that she has changed as a director very clearly as part of her growth into being a bigger person, right? Even transitioning in her life. And she said previously, apparently the first Matrix film, they storyboarded the hell out of that movie. They had everything down to a science. They knew exactly what they were shooting. This wasn't quite so much that way. It's a different creative process. And I think that's important to embrace as a director. But I do think that's where most of those points on Rotten Tomatoes are getting kicked off, because it's just a little sloppy. Yeah. And that does hurt it.
Yeah, there are a number of fight scenes, and you get some kind of classic kung fu stuff but it's not near as meticulously choreographed. They would have long sequences of the actors, going through the motions of a fight scene. And this, like I said, it's a lot more quick cut. It's less defined, and it's also more almost like a brawl. Like, there's several fights with lots of people, and so they don't really have to focus on just 2 people at once.
Right. And again, for losing that quality of action, also worth mentioning, you're going to be losing a bit of that over philosophizing as well. Philosophize? Yeah, I think that's how you say it. It's not so in your face with the weird philosophy. You're not going to have the architect saying ergo 1,000 times in a scene, in your face. It's much more laid back that way as well. Yeah. And that's a bonus. That's a feature of, I think, losing some of that action stuff. And additionally, you get a much more exciting color palette. This version of the Matrix is a lot richer, and it looks great. Lots of sunlight, lots of natural beaming kind of colors on screen, lots of oranges and yellows and hues that I don't previously remember from Matrix films. Part of that's because of the DVD grade also, but because it's a different time and it's a different Matrix. So things are a little different.
Right. And I remember reading, or it may have been an interview I listened to with Keanu Reeves and Carrie-Anne Moss, where they wanted, or Lana Wachowski wanted to use more color in the Matrix. She wanted to get away from the green, which I've seen some people be upset about. The Matrix isn't green enough. This is a new Matrix. It's a new program. Does that is your computer the same from 20 years ago? No, I don't think so. So she wanted to put a lot more color. So we have a character's hair, Morpheus is very colorful in this. Everyone in the original films had very drab, grays and blacks. Morpheus is looking awome. He's got
Morpheus has the greatest fits, dude. He did not have to go that hard. He shows up,
blue,
oh my God.
Yellow,
yes,
And it's interesting because it's kind of Neo is trapped again, and they almost say, well, the way we got you out originally, we got you out through mystery and theater. I was this crazy, elusive person you were looking for.
Yeah.
But we've already done that. And he's like, no, we got to be a little bit different. And there's a really great part where Morpheus walks out of this bathroom stall, and he was like, I used to emote and talk, and now I'm walking out of a bathroom stall. That's how things have changed, And there's that scene cracks me up every time.
Yeah.
Which I love.
Yeah, it's this unique, like, in universe response to the idea of rebooting something and restarting something. And for a lot of people, it's too tongue in cheek, it's too much, it's overblown, it comes back on itself, it's not funny, it's not cool, it's lame, right? I don't feel that way. I don't think Andy feels that way either. Like, nobody else is doing this, right? Go watch Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like, that is a basically a shameless cash grab reboot. And I like Ghostbusters Afterlife. Like, I thought it was a fine movie, but like that's kind of what people expect these days. And then there's this. Like, this entire film, I didn't know where it was going. I wasn't sure what was coming. Like, I most of this movie is a bit of a surprise. It does turn into a bit of a almost like a bit of a heist film at one point, because you know,
Yeah.
you're trying to heist your way into moving around the Matrix efficiently. The first film, in a way, was like that, right? Morpheus and friends trying to get Neo out of the Matrix, and now that shift to Trinity is different, but I think that's welcome, right? Like, we definitely don't want the Force Awakens. Like, you don't just want
Yeah.
an exact reboot of the Matrix.
That's what I was gonna say. People, like, we particularly complain about how much Star Wars refuses to ever do anything new and relies so much on nostalgia, and then we finally get a movie that doesn't rely on nostalgia, and people are upset. But I mentioned that there's a lot of lore. That's a good thing, but also I think one of the other criticisms I have is there is so much going on. Like, this hits the ground running. Like, there is so much dialogue.
Yes.
Kind of like the opening scene is kind of a recreation of the opening scene in the original Matrix. And Bugs, played by Jessica Henwick, is like, she's British, she has a British accent, and she's like saying lots of stuff that's really important, but it's kind of hard to understand. This feels like 3 movies in one at times.
Yeah.
Like, there is so much going on in each section of it. It's kind of hard to keep up with, and that's like I said, I think that's something that is difficult to deal with. You could have simplified it, but I also appreciate them putting a lot in it.
It's true. By the time our characters are finally getting back to, like, you know, the being outside of the Matrix, being in the real world as it is, you start to find out kind of the developments that have happened since the previous trilogy. And a lot of those are smart. Like, they grow the world in smart ways, right? Like, we're not just going to Zion again, and we're not just fighting Sentinels. Like, the world's changed a little bit. Like, technology has shifted. Alignment of certain machines may not be so anti-human anymore, right? Like, there's a really cool
Gray areas.
there's a really unique technology now available to bring programs essentially out of the Matrix into the real world in this kind of like reverse fashion. That's kind of neat. Like, that stuff kind of works. But Andy makes a good point. By the time you get to, like, where our characters are getting broken out of the Matrix and things are being explained to them again, it's just like, oh God, you got to explain a whole other world on top of all this now. Like, the meta of Neo being a game developer who made the Matrix in a world that may or may not be the Matrix, and then breaking out of that to get into, like, it's just a lot. It's a lot for one movie.
Yeah.
And it makes a 2.5-hour film at times feel fast, at other times you feel just kind of slow. And I think that pacing could use a tighten up for sure.
Yeah. It also, the last act is also kind of a big complicated heist kind of thing, and it eventually started to feel a bit like Mission Impossible, where they explain this like a really convoluted plan that they have to do, and it's like, well, while this team is doing this, then the team B has to do this, and then so team person C way off in the back can do, like, it feels like one of those films by the end. It gets so complicated.
Yeah, it really does. It does get overcomplicated, and that's, you know, that's maybe a good spot to start to bring things around. Like, The Matrix Resurrections has problems for sure. Like, there's a lot about it that can be frustrating, especially if you've got high hopes coming off like the previous trilogy. But I think where it works is in its like ideological presentation of a reboot, right? Like, in a way, it answers that in kind of the perfect fashion for the Matrix. It comments on what that means and what that is, and how we engage with that technology and entertainment now. And like, the first Matrix did that too. It just had better cinematography and it had better action. And this isn't rated as high as the Matrix on Rotten, but it's definitely higher than the Matrix 3. Like, and it's almost as high as the Matrix 2. Like, this is a pretty fine Matrix sequel, all things considered. I think people just got really stoked to see what was next, and they came in with the wrong look.
Yeah, well, like Mark Kuramoto often says, you know, enjoying cinema is a lot about what you bring to it. So if you bring a lot of kind of certain expectations and they're not met, then you're only going to disappoint yourself. It's like this has been compared a lot to The Last Jedi, which I was like, I love The Last Jedi, so I think it's great.
That's a good critique. That's not bad.
Again, a lot of people don't, but they don't because they expected something completely different. So we kind of have that same situation here.
I think expectations. I don't know. You're right. I think it's a management of expectations thing.
Yeah. At the same time, I don't understand like how, it's not like they made this heavily marketed. They didn't make this like a big event film like Star Wars or Spider-Man. It seemed like they kind of held back on the marketing a little bit, and that's fine because it's not that, they knew it wasn't going to be that kind of event film.
Right. And like somehow that leaves me feeling like it does its job in a way that I didn't expect. And like, if I can go to the movies now and see something like I didn't expect and be taken on a ride that like I wasn't sure where I was going, like that's a good time for me. That's a fun time at the movies, not for everybody, but uniquely for me. One more thing, because we didn't address some performances. Almost everybody in these movies. Yeah. Almost everybody in these movies. Really good. Yeah. I had a lot of fun with Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. Jessica Henwick is actually really cool as this new character. I thought she was fine. Neo and Trinity are uniquely, I feel like it shows that they show their age. And I'm not sure why that is. I don't know. I guess they've just been both doing their own things that Keanu Reeves and
they're both in their 50s now.
Yeah,
what do you expect?
I don't know what I expected. They're fine. Keanu Reeves feels a little offbeat in a couple scenes. That bathroom scene you mentioned earlier, his reaction to Morpheus is like almost comedy. Like it's really odd. I'm not sure what he's going for all the time, but
I feel like there's a lot of humor in this movie, and some of it is like literal, like borderline slapstick comedy, and like I think that's another thing. Like that's not something you expect in this kind of film, and so it's like it really throws you off.
No, and the old Matrix films had that too. Like there's a lot of subtlety in those films if you kind of go back and watch little subtle reactions from characters, and this obviously is not so subtle, but I think it's worth another watch. Yeah, and maybe I could get another swing at that stuff and see what I find.
It definitely helped to rewatch with subtitles.
I would imagine. Yeah, definitely. Any other thoughts or recommendations? The theater experience versus HBO. I mean.
To continue with performances, the new crew we meet are a lot of fun. I wish we had more time with them. We said Neil Patrick Harris also, but then I wanted to get to a familiar character played by Jonathan Groff.
I love Jonathan Groff.
Who I don't think this is a spoiler. Who plays Agent Smith? Smith is back.
Uniquely,
and he has been reskinned. Hugo Weaving, he wanted to do it, but there was a scheduling conflict, and he wasn't able to get on board. And so they reskinned the character, which is really interesting because when you think about it, these are programs; they can look like anyone. And so Jonathan Groff, he actually initially plays Neo's like supervisor or boss at the game development company they're both at, and he's kind of keeps his thumb on him, applies the pressure,
keeps him in line. Yeah, that's right.
And he's eventually revealed to be Agent Smith, and it's a really interesting performance because he's not doing Hugo Weaving, he's not doing Agent Smith from previous films. He's a new man, a new program, his own person, and it's really different. And that's one of the updates I like. Like he calls him Tom instead of Mr. Anderson,
right?
And it's it was I really enjoyed his performance, and I hope he's back.
I appreciate that you brought that one up. I love Jonathan Groff. Jonathan Groff is delight. Jonathan Groff, you would know him. He played the original King George in Hamilton. He's the one on Disney Plus. That's him. He is Kristoff in the Frozen films, and he is. I forget his name in Mindhunter, David Fincher's Mindhunter on Netflix. That series, he's the main character in that as well. Lots of Broadway experience. He's great, man. I love Jonathan Groff. So he's a lot of fun in this as well. Like I'm glad he's getting some attention. I shout out to Andy for pointing him out. Yeah, Jonathan Groff's awesome. I would have brought him up myself, but his character in the film is a little exculpatory, so I didn't know if I wanted to get into that. But I'm glad you stumbled over that landmine for me, Andy. He's great. Any other thoughts or recommendations?
I think I'm ready.
I'm not sure anybody's going to be surprised. Andy, would you recommend The Matrix Resurrections?
Yeah, I would, especially for fans of the film. It's definitely you got to be familiar with the specific of the first film, but help to be really familiar with the world of the Matrix. And I mean, I had a lot of fun. I've watched it several times. It does have some issues. It is a little bit too long. There's a ton going on. It's like an exposition dump constantly. A lot of new ideas, new lore, but it's a lot of fun. And if you can watch it again, like I said, at home on HBO Max, and kind of catch a lot of the extra stuff, I think you'll like it. So I really enjoyed it, and yeah, I would definitely recommend.
I would recommend it as well. I definitely was hesitant to watch this. I'll be honest. Like the runtime was intimidating, and I had just gone and seen Spider-Man again, and I was like, I don't know if I want to jump in, go to a movie theater. So being able to watch it like on HBO is huge. If you're unsure about the Matrix, if you're thinking, well, they seem to really like it, but it's really long. What if I'm not into it? Like, watch it at home, right? Take a break in the middle, do laundry, like take an intermission if you want. Like, take it at your own pace. Like, I totally recommend this movie. I think it's really cool. I think a lot of people might watch it and not like it, but just don't go in thinking, oh,
Go in
this
with
is
an
going
open
to
mind.
be, yeah, a faithful recreation of the Matrix. That's never what it was supposed to be. Like from the very beginning, it is very clearly not supposed to be that. So,
Mhm.
you
Well, the
know,
other thing is like people don't actually want new movies. A lot of times, they really just want to somehow experience the original movie, and or just turn it up, which is what I think the sequels did. You know, the Matrix Reloaded has everything is turned up to 11, like the philosophy, the action, the everything is kind of turned up as much as it could be. And it's like we've already done that, and Lana Wachowski is very much interested in doing things, and she doesn't care. She doesn't care. She doesn't care what audiences want or like. She doesn't care what the film executives want or like. She cares about being an artist and making her vision.
mm. And I think that's what an auteur does, right?
Mhm.
Like that's ultimately a good thing. I don't know. I'm a fan. As a person who watches a lot of movies, like I think The Matrix Resurrections is something really unique. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but like I'm a fan. Before we move on